Hello, I'm Mike Vinsel, Michael D. Vinsel, and today I'm continuing to read my book, Travels with Nobody, and today we're gonna start chapter 5, which is on page 66, and today is March 20th, 2024. It's the vernal equinox today, so it's a holiday. So anyway, here in Japan, I'm in Japan. It's a holiday here. Okay, here we go. Chapter 5, Another Day, Another Picture. Here at the pond in Japan, working on a picture, I'm trying to remember my thoughts that night at the motel in Boulder, the first time I had ever been to Boulder. I had indeed cried at the truck stop in Kansas the night before, and I remember at the motel in Boulder wondering if I was okay, wondering if there was something wrong with me. I had felt that way periodically ever since it became clear to me that other people could do schoolwork that I could not do. I was about 9 years old when I first began to realize that the problem might not be with the nature of the work or the methods of teaching. It might be that there was a shortcoming in me that made me have such difficulty. I knew that stupid people usually don't realize that they are stupid. I remember lying in bed at the motel in Boulder, wondering back to Grandpa and what he'd told me. He'd said that for a period of 10 years, his wife, my grandmother, had not talked to him. Talk about silent treatment. Well, that beats the band, I muttered to myself. Grandpa, what happened? I muttered that too, I remember. Somewhere deep in the past, I remember hearing that she had been institutionalized and had had electroshock therapy. Who had said that? I think it was my mother. But she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to somebody else, but I happened to be in the room, too young to understand. I turned off the TV, brushed my teeth, and lay on the bed. Grandma had never initiated conversation that I ever heard. She had cryptically answered questions that we, her grandchildren, had asked. When we'd asked how old she was, she'd said, "Older than you." It had always been clear to me that she did not enjoy talking. To us, her grandchildren in particular? No, it was everybody. I didn't know, but then, lying on the bed in the motel in Boulder, the image that came to mind was Nurse Ratched applying gel to someone's temples. Then I imagined Billy Pilgrim the second the power came on, when he was transported in his mind back to the train arriving in Dresden, the city beautiful before the bombing. I had never thought of these family legends from the point of view of what Grandma might have seen. Those are references to Slaughterhouse-Five and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in opposite order, just in case you don't know. But anyway, okay. I also knew that while my mother had forbidden us to have guns, many of our neighbors and some of my friends did have guns. They went hunting. I had heard the triumphal whispered stories of some of the guys who, instead of deer camp, had gone up to Thetford Mines, Quebec, and had come back with stories that they hoped their wives would never hear. Had Grandpa really gone to deer camp every year and never got a deer? I believe Grandpa went to deer camp, that's all. The next morning was sunny and beautiful. The air was cold and crisp. I opened the curtain in the motel room. I put on pants and a shirt and went outside to see what Boulder looked like. Just outside the motel door, I looked west and saw the Rocky Mountains, majestic and sharp. I would later learn that this part was called the Front Range, and the giant rock sheets that jutted diagonally upward to the right were called the Flatirons. I went back into the motel to take a shower. I decided that I would check out of the motel, spend some time in Boulder, and then if I felt like staying another night, I would. There were certainly other motels. I left and found a diner and had breakfast. After that, I drove into downtown Boulder. The guys who drove the Volvo P1800s had said that the Pearl Street Mall was the main hangout place. I found it and parked. It wasn't a mall. It was a street that was blocked off to traffic. I walked around for a while. I don't remember much of what I did for the few hours I was there. I went to a pizza restaurant that sold pizza by the slice. I got 2 slices and sat at a booth. There I was, in Boulder, Colorado, hanging out on the Pearl Street Mall, eating pizza. I don't remember the name of the restaurant, but I remember the song playing was Burning Down the House by the Talking Heads. Kevin Paulson, Pat Wrigley, and the Volvo P1800 crew were all big Talking Heads fans. I liked the Talking Heads, but I had never bought any of their albums. I had only bought a few albums in my life. My brothers and older sister had left dozens of their albums at our house as they had moved away. I had never really needed to get new ones. It was around 3 in the afternoon when I was there at the pizza place. It wasn't very different from the pizza places they had in New Dartford, New Hampshire, the places my friends and I had hung out in when I was in high school. The guy working behind the counter seemed to be about my age, maybe a little older, but he had a confident aspect about him. He had long hair and a ponytail and wore a bandana in the manner of a pirate, wrapped over his head with a knot in the back. He had the beginnings of a beard and mustache and wire-rimmed glasses. He rolled out dough and sorted the pizza toppings. I wondered if he might be a University of Colorado student. The song changed to Steppin' Out by Joe Jackson. There were several other customers, but only I was eating. The others were just talking and smoking clove cigarettes. Kevin Paulson and the Volvo crew all smoked clove cigarettes too. I had once commented I had once commented to them that Jakarta, the brand they smoked, was the capital of Indonesia. I remember have regretted saying that as soon as I said it. I remembered the biblical adage attributed to Mark Twain: "It is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." What made me behave that way when I knew not to? Anyway, this time at the pizza parlor in Boulder, Colorado, I didn't say anything to the other people, and they didn't say anything to me. I finished the pizza and left. The snow was melting. The sun was shining. I had an hour left on the parking meter, so I walked around until I came to a stream. It was called Boulder Creek. There was a pedestrian walkway along it, so I followed it. It went through parts of the campus of the University of Colorado. The campus was deserted for the Thanksgiving break. After a while, I turned back and went to the car. I found out from a pamphlet that the mountain with the star on it was Flagstaff Mountain, and there was a road I could take to the top. So that's what I did. I followed the winding road up the mountain. I wasn't sure if my car was losing power or if it was the same, and that it was slow only because of the mountain. but I had it floored and was only going about 20 miles per hour. I noticed a few cars behind me, so when a pullover appeared, I took it and let the faster cars go by. I finally got to a place with a big parking area for people to admire the view. I parked and got out. There it was, all spread before me, looking east, the entirety of the North American continent. It was sunny and flat as far as I could see. Far off, as clear a day as it was, the horizon disappeared in a haze that blended the land with the sky. I had never seen such a panorama before. The people who parked next to me had Kansas plates on their car. It was two elderly couples traveling together. One of the ladies talked to me. "Did you drive all the way out here from New Hampshire?" she asked. I told her I had. "Did you take I-70? "Yes, I did. I stopped at a truck stop on Thanksgiving Day," I told her. "Thanksgiving at a truck stop. But at least you dodged that storm. I'd never seen a storm like that in November in Kansas. That was an early one." "We're from Topeka," she said. "I'm from New Hampshire. I went past Topeka the day before yesterday. I'm heading to San Francisco. My brother lives there," I said. We chatted for a few minutes. Then they walked to the visitor center. I took a hiking trail further up the mountain. The view opened up more and more as I walked. I found a place to sit. Just to have the sun shining on my face felt good. I had felt out of place at the pizza restaurant. I sat and listened to the silence. There was no wind, and the air was so silent it almost made me wonder if I had lost my hearing. But then I could hear people talking in the distance. Then I heard the call of a crow. The sunshine was stronger than it would be in New Hampshire at that time of year. The temperature difference between day and night was much greater than I remember it being in the east. I decided that I would get back on the road. I didn't need to spend another night in Boulder. It occurred to me that visiting a city is only fun if you know people there. I didn't know anybody in Boulder. The people I did know who had lived in Boulder were not there now. Pat Wrigley and Kevin had been to Boulder when the Volvo guys were there, and they had talked about how cool it was, what a mecca it was for hippies. That was Pat's gauge on the desirability of a place. I'm sure they were right, but I wasn't sure if a hippie mecca was what I was interested in. I chuckled at that thought. I was heading to San Francisco, after all. Then I would go up to Olympia. Was Olympia a hippie mecca? I went back to the car and drove back through Boulder, backtracking my way to the highway toward Denver. I gassed up and got going. I-25 south, the Front Range Mountains gleaming in the sunshine, eyes on the road ahead, past Broomfield into the suburbs of Denver. The car seemed to be doing okay. I could maintain 60 miles per hour on a flat. Broomfield. I knew of Broomfield because of my tent, the tent my mother had made. She made it from a Frostline kit. That company was located in Broomfield, Colorado, and here I was, driving past Broomfield with my tent in the back seat. In a few hours, I was going past Colorado Springs. The big mountain to my right was Pikes Peak. Zebulon Pike. I remembered his name from high school history class. What an interesting name. I wondered if his friends called him Zeb. It was late in the afternoon when I crossed into New Mexico. My image of New Mexico had been that it was hot and arid, but it was cold, and there were more trees than I had expected. I don't remember exactly where I stayed that night. It was somewhere on I-25 in New Mexico, several hours east of Albuquerque. I know that because I do remember arriving in Albuquerque. It was late afternoon, just before dark. I had decided to call my brother Philip's friend, the guy who lived in Albuquerque. I stopped at a convenience store to use the payphone. I told him where I was, and he gave me directions to his house. I got back on the highway, took the exit he'd told me, and found my way to his place. He was a nice enough guy. I forget his name. He lived in a basement room of his mother's house and worked from home with a computer. I didn't know what kind of work he did, but he'd been one of Philip's classmates in college. They both had majored in computer science. He and I were walking out to a bar somewhere for a few beers. He told me of his college days with Philip, that they had seen a lot of great musicians play at the Stone Church in Newmarket, near the university. That would be the University of New Hampshire. I had only visited Philip a couple times at the university and didn't know of the Stone Church. When it got late, we went back to the house. He showed me his room. It was the whole basement of the house. In a corner, he had two pet rats that lived in glass fish tanks. They gave the room a faint, musty smell. He had a pool table, and we spent a few hours drinking beer, playing pool, and listening to bootleg Grateful Dead tapes. I suppose his mother couldn't hear the music from upstairs. I liked the Grateful Dead and had been to several of their concerts. I loved their albums and loved their concerts live, but I never enjoyed listening to those long, droning bootleg tapes. But I didn't say anything about it. He reminded me that year the Grateful Dead New Year's show would be at the San Francisco Civic Center. He already had tickets to 3 of the shows and wondered if it would be possible for him to stay at Matthew's place for the shows. I told him that I'd ask. I forget the exact words I used, but I gave him Matthew's phone number. I slept until about 10 the next morning. I got on the road and left Albuquerque. I stopped to gas up and went to a convenience store. It was a Circle K store. I remember because I bought a reusable plastic travel cup. They had a policy that I could get free coffee with that cup at any Circle K store. It was the Circle K Coffee Club. For some reason, I remember that. I felt strange as I got on Interstate 40 and drove west. I had not really enjoyed my visit with my brother's friend. It had been generous of him to put me up for the night, but we hadn't had much to talk about. I knew nothing about computers. We had talked about the Grateful Dead, but he had talked about the technical aspects of the music and what the best recording equipment was. I knew nothing of those things. I was more interested in the lyrics of the songs and the stories they conjured. While the fire lights aglow, strange shadows in the flames will grow, till things we've never seen will seem familiar. He wasn't a bad person, but it didn't seem normal for a guy his age to have pet rats, or to live with his mother, and to work out of his bedroom on a computer. I knew I had no right to judge the guy, but these kinds of thoughts went through my mind as I drove. It had been cloudy in Albuquerque in the morning, but it cleared up as I drove. The car was running smoothly. I could feel that it was slowly losing power. Perhaps it was a headwind, or maybe I was imperceptibly gaining elevation. I had noticed that periodically on the side of the road there were signs showing the elevation. I had noticed those signs first in Colorado, that Denver was indeed about a mile high. That was interesting because I had never thought of flat land being of high elevation, but of course that is a common thing around the world. I drove and drove. Hours went by. Of course, now, 57 years old, sitting at the pond in Japan, I can't remember every detail of the ride, but I can remember certain scenes in precise detail, things like that Circle K Coffee Club cup. I had taken notice to question why they had called it a club. If you bought the cup, you would be a member of that club. Had I wanted to be a member of a club? I remember at the time thinking about that. I'm a cup-carrying member of the Circle K Coffee Club, I had said to myself. I suppose it is common for people of that age, I was 20, to want to be a member of a club of some sort. But I wasn't really a member of any club. I knew that. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5, and I'll begin chapter 6 shortly. So that brings us up to page 74 or 75.